Coruscant, the capital of the galaxy, was one of the most populous and well-known planets in the Star Wars universe. The alleged birthplace of humankind and the capital of both the Republic and the Empire, Coruscant was, as you surely know, a Eucumenopolis, planet buried under 5,127 levels of city. This enormous metropolis, galactic city, had a population numbering in the trillions and a very long history. Today, we'll be going through some of that history and sharing 10 stories from the galactic capital.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
We're going to start in the unfathomably distant past, long before Coruscant's original surface was buried under Galactic City, before the planet was called Coruscant even. In these ancient days, 200,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the planet's name was Notron, and it was a much different place. It was a habitable but chilly world, the sixth from its star, and in ancient times, it was a fairly ordinary habitable world dominated by oceans and verdant continents. It gave rise to not one, but two indigenous sentient species known to history as the Taungs and Zhells. The Zhell were flat-faced humanoids, numerous and industrious, and over the course of their history, they banded together into 13 nations, which formed an alliance from Notron's largest city, the metropolis of Great Zhell. The 13 nations may once have been rivals, but they eventually banded together against the Taungs, pooling their resources to create a grand army, the battalions of Zhell. The Zhell's planetary neighbors, the Taungs, were less numerous, but on an individual basis they were tougher and typically fiercer in combat. The Taungs were also humanoids, with grey skin, bony forehead ridges, and sharp claws, and their society was divided into warrior clans which honored strength and glory in battle. Such battles were, more often than not, fought against the Zhell, and as these two civilizations advanced and expanded across Notron, they became bitter enemies. Eventually, they decided that Notron wasn't big enough for the two of them, and they each fought to drive the other either off-world or to extinction. The war was long and brutal, and its battles became the subject of many legends and works of epic poetry. Most famously, the ancient war between the Taungs and the Zhell was immortalized in Dha Werda Verda, one of the galaxy's most well-known pieces of ancient literature. This renowned piece of epic poetry consisted of 700 verses, divided into 11 chapters, and was only ever partially translated into Galactic Basic from the ancient language of Notron Cant. But the translated parts gripped the imagination of the galactic public hundreds of millennia after the end of the war Dha Werda Verda described, and long after the Notron of old and those who had fought over it were buried under layers of urban zones, the school children of Galactic City were made to memorize the names of ancient Taung generals and the stories of their lives. The Essential Guide to Warfare gives us a full translation of the 9th chapter of Dha Werda Verda, titled The Maker Comes to Unmake, which we'll now recite in full. This chapter describes what the poem's Taung authors considered the climax of the ancient war, and it begins at a dire moment for the Taungs. In battle after battle, the numerous battalions of Zhell had prevailed over the skill of the Taungs. Many great Taung chieftains, among them such legends as Olak the Reaver and the Doom of Ulmara, had been slain. The Taungs had retreated to their last stronghold, a high place overlooking Great Zhell, where they made a last stand in defiance of their enemies, as Dha Werda Verda details. And so upon his pyre burned the Doom of Ulmara, and the warrior band stood as ragged bandits in zigzag lines of mourning. With the dawn, the flat-faced Zhell would come, cackling and howling, oozing mirth and tricks, and find the shade of the Doom departed and the Taungs unprotected. And so, with the dawn would our woe be revealed. Our once bright armaments would become stacked grave goods, trophies for Zhell children. Our flesh would become smoke given to uncaring gods, and the sky would forget our names. With death upon him, Rexutu the Unconquerable prepared to be stripped of all by his enemy, but vowed that his honor would be the last to be torn away. And so the Unconquerable gathered his kinsmen and his oath-girdlings alike. They polished their fearsome helms that they might flash even in the weak sun of Notron. They rewrapped the hilts of their weapons and pounded straight the shafts that they might slake their thirst in Zhell ichor a final time. Assembled, they ascended in taut Taung lines to the high place where the Reaver had stacked his standard before it was cast down into the mire. They gazed out over the gathering places and walking ways of Great Zhell, where they scaled peak and cradled valley, the line of lights ordering the night. They unfurled the Taung banner, reversed, a reckless thing snapping in the dark, awaiting Zhell eyes. And they performed ceremonies of leave-taking, for now they had died to the world and must be remade among the stars. When the dawn came, the Zhell awakened and saw the Taungs upon the high place and were afraid, for the morning light caught the glint of helms and weapons and created phantom warriors made of dazzle and distance. But the cleverest of them were not deceived and saw how few we were. And so they assembled without haste, merry in mockery, and prepared to march. And in the high place, we awaited death. But then came a shaking of the ground, and the sun's light was eclipsed by a bright and terrible fire that exploded from the rock. The patterns of Great Zhell shivered and broke. And after this came darkness, as the very air turned to black ash. The Zhell fell on their faces in terror, and from the high place we ran in haste to meet them, and we were cloaked in shadow. The Maker had come to unmake, and the Taungs would be his instruments. On the day the Taungs believed they were fated to die, Great Zhell was destroyed by a massive volcanic eruption which filled the air with clouds of ash. The battalions of Zhell were thrown into disarray, and the Taungs took advantage of the chaos, attacking under the cover of darkness. They routed their enemies, reversing the course of the entire war. The Zhell were utterly defeated, enduring grievous losses, while the Taungs, beyond all hope, would live to fight another day. For 2 years after this day, clouds of ash would darken the skies of Notron, and the planet's distant sun would prove unable to pierce them. In that time, the Taungs struck again and again under the cover of darkness, slaughtering the Zhell and driving them to the brink of collapse. The Taungs took their dramatic reversal of fortune as a sign of divine intervention, proof that the gods were on their side, and in memory of their great victory, they took to calling themselves Dha Werda Verda, the warriors of the shadow. Unfortunately for the Taungs, the ash clouds didn't linger in Notron's skies forever, and as the shadow departed, the war turned back in the Zhell's favor. The Taungs were eventually defeated and exiled from Notron, forced to flee in great spaceships across the stars, seeking a new home. The Zhell took Notron for their own, and under their sole rule, the planet was transformed. As Zhell society entered a new age of peace and prosperity, the Zhell multiplied rapidly. Their cities expanded and merged until they became one great city, a shell around the entire planet. 100,000 years after the destruction of Great Zhell, this city stretched from pole to pole, burying Notron's original surface under a layer of durasteel and ferrocrete. And 10,000 years after that, with the help of the Gree, the city began to expand vertically, building upon itself, becoming the multi-leveled Ecumenopolis that would later be known as Galactic City. As Notron was completely consumed by this glittering metropolis, it became known by a new name, which reflected its appearance from orbit, Coruscant. And as their homeworld was transformed, so too were the Zhell, who, by the time they struck out into the stars, had also become known by a new name, humanity. From Coruscant, these humans, the heirs of the ancient Zhell, spread out across the galaxy, settling countless worlds and building galaxy-spanning civilizations, with Coruscant at the heart of it all. The Zhell not only won their descendants sole control of their homeworld, but also rule over the entire galaxy. Ironically enough though, no Zhell accounts of their ancient war survived to the modern age. Indeed, as the Zhell and their heirs converted Notron into Coruscant, they destroyed nearly all traces of their own history, burying it all under kilometers of skyscraper blocks. Humanity forgot its own origins to such an extreme that, in the Imperial era, it was uncertain whether or not humanity had actually evolved on Coruscant or not.